Welcome everyone. My name is Hélder Pinto, and in this short tutorial, I am going to briefly explain the proper steps to understand the pipeline between CryEngine and 3ds Max, and how would you go about exporting your assets into CryEngine 3. As a base for the tutorial, we are going to be using this bench, which already has proper UVs, textures, and LODs. So we are going to grab all that and put it in game, creating the needed materials, collisions, parenting, and finally exporting it all out to the CryEngine. So let's jump into Max here, and let's open our base scene. Make sure you put it over on Crysis 2, Game Crysis 2 Objects, and inside a folder called E3D and slash bench underscore start. So you will get something like this. This is a very basic scene with 3 objects on it. What I like to call the render mesh, and you will also find 2 LODs on it, 2 pre-made LODs. I like to use Outliner for my layer organization, naming, etc. So let's create 2 layers first. Let's create one layer called LODs and the second one called Proxy. So let's put both our LODs on the LODs layer and hide that out. And to properly export this to CryEngine, you're gonna need a dummy. So let's create a dummy and call it park furniture underscore bench. And make sure this dummy is on 0, 0, 0 on the world coordinates on the XYZ axis. So let's open up our schematic view. I like to use the schematic view a lot to do my parenting. So let's move our render mesh here and LODs out of the way, and let's attach our render mesh to our dummy. So let's click in connect and drag and drop to park furniture underscore bench to the dummy, and you'll see a link there represented by a green line. So now let's bring up our utility panel. And if you don't have your CryEngine 3 exporter button, make sure you create it. You create it in the utilities panel. Make sure you drag and drop it into one of those buttons. Bring the exporter panel up, click clear list, and add selected. And remember, you should add your dummy, and export file per node must be active. So let's export nodes, and you're gonna get a new file in there, park furniture bench CGF, which is our object. So here in CryEngine, let's click in brush, and let's open up the folder objects E3D bench underscore start, and let's drag and drop the park furniture bench asset into our viewport. Obviously, we will get a red texture on it, since we don't have any materials or textures applied to it. So we're gonna take care of that now. So back into Max, let's bring up our material editor, click on an empty slot, and let's name it park furniture underscore bench. As you can see, it's always the same name for organizational sakes. And let's click in CryText shader, click in the standard button, and let's transform this into a multi sub-object material. And we're gonna need 4 submaterials for this. We're gonna need a wood material and a metal material. And for each material, we're gonna need a proxy. So let's create a proxy underscore wood and proxy underscore metal. So let's turn this into a standard material. Click OK. And let's name it. Obviously, it's very important. Name it wood. Turn it into a CryText shader material. Go back and let's just drag and drop these submaterials on top of the others. It's much faster that way. Make sure copy is active, not instance. So let's click the second one and type metal. Go back up. The third one will be proxy underscore wood. And make sure physicalized and no draw is active, since this will be a proxy submaterial, obviously. So for the fourth one, we're going to call it proxy underscore metal. And again, physicalized and no draw must be active. So go to parent, one up, and obviously make sure your asset is using the material you just created. So now we're gonna go into element, and we're gonna make sure that the asset will have the proper IDs applied to it. So let's select the wood sections, and let's go into the polygon material ID section and make sure the ID is set to 1, which is wood. So let's select the metal parts now, and make sure it's set to 2, which is metal. So with that being done, we can now export it to the engine. Let's go over here. Let's export our material. So click in from Max to create material. You're gonna get a pop-up, and make sure it's in the objects e3d/bench underscore start folder. It's very important that it's in the same folder as your CGF file. So again, just call it park furniture underscore bench. It's always the same name. So you're gonna see a brand new material on the material editor here. So again, it's an object /e3d/bench underscore start, and here it is, your material, park furniture underscore bench. So you're gonna need to make sure that this material is applied to the object that you just placed in the editor. So just select the object and click on that very first button on the material editor on the top. So now let's just bring our textures in. So as you can see here, we have two new objects, which is we have our material, our CGF, and our max file. Everything is in one folder. So let's drag and drop our PSDs into Photoshop, and let's create our TIFF files. We always work with TIFF files with CryEngine. So let's select our diffuse, save as, make sure you go up one folder, format CryTIFF plugin, park furniture underscore bench.tiff. Again, see, it's always the same name. You'll get this menu. Just select diffuse H quality, and 1024 should do it. If this will be for for production, you will probably need to select 256 or 512. And if you want to see how your texture would like, just select 256 and zoom in on it. You will see a previs on the right. So just select 1024 again, and press OK to export it. Let's do the same for our normal map. File, save as, CryTIFF plugin, go up one folder, and very, very, very important, make sure your normal maps are always called underscore DDN. This is very important, underscore DDN. So the exporter knows that you're exporting a normal map now, and it automatically selected the preset normal map underscore low Q. If this will be for a portfolio piece, you can select just HQ, which you will get much better quality. So let's select normal map HQ 1024 and press OK. So here's let's just have a quick look into Explorer. Here's our new textures, two new TIFFs, and you will also notice there's two new DDSs as well. These files are created on the fly, and you should leave them alone because they are created automatically by the resource compiler. You should always work with TIFFs and TIFFs alone. So it's these same TIFFs that you will load in the texture maps here. So just click in those three dots. Make sure you're in the folder Game Crisis 2 Objects E3D Bench Start, and load your diffuse texture. Here it is. So just use the same diffuse on the spec for now, and load your normal map as well. And make sure the shader is kept to illumine, both for the wood and metal, and select a surface type for it. For the proxy wood, the shader must be no draw, and the surface type must be the same as we selected for the wood, which is in this case matte wood hollow. So again, for the proxy metal this time around, no draw, and the same surface type as the metal, we selected matte metal thin. Let's quickly look around, and let's have a look at our collision, shall we? So just bring the console up and type p underscore draw helpers 1. So as you can see, this bench still has no textures, no collisions. So p draw helpers back to 0 and back to max, and let's create our collisions. Make sure both your materials wood and metal have physicalized off, and your proxy materials have physicalized on and no draw on the drop down list. So let's go into elements and let's open our toolbox, our CryEngine tools toolbox. There's a very useful function in here. We call it Fizz Proxy Tools, which lets you create collisions very, very easily. So we can just click on box and it will take the bounding box of your selection and it will create an object around it, a collision. So we need to make sure that the material ID is set to 3, because in this case it's proxy wood. And on the UDP, just type box, because we should use primitives as much as possible. And in this case, a box is more than enough. So let's select the lower blanks, press box, and there you go. Let's give it some opacity so we can actually see through it. Let's give it a reddish color and click opacity and bring it down to around 50 so you can see through your collision meshes. Let's do the same for the proxy metal. Let's give it a bluish tone and let's bring the opacity down. So again, let's go into element and select the metal parts on the right. And material ID this time is 4, obviously, because it will be metal. And let's click in box. There you go. So let's select the left part now. Click box again. There you go. Get out of the element mode. Close the Cry toolbox. And as you can see, there's a couple modifiers in there. Let's just collapse that out. Or even easily, we can just select all our collisions, right click on it, convert to editable poly. So if you go to object properties, user defined tab, you will see that there's box in there already. That means that this will be a primitive. The engine will read these as a box. If you want to have something a little bit more complex, just type other underscore render mesh. Other render mesh, or just leave it empty. So let's select these vertices in here, bring them a little bit to the left. Like that. There you go. Since we need a little bit more complex collision geometry, that's the reason we need to use other render mesh. Let's just collapse this. Let's make sure our parenting is also working correctly. See, all your physics proxies are named correctly and attached correctly into your render mesh as well. That's one of the good things you get when you use that toolbox to create your collisions. It's very useful script. So let's attach our proxy. Let's move our proxies into the proxy layer, so we can hide that out. Back into the layer, hide the proxy. Select. Let's have a look at our LODs. Let's bring the statistics on. Statistics. Click selection. So as you can see, the first LOD has 200 trees, and the second one has 100 trees. Each LOD should have exactly at least, half the trees as your previous one. So let's unhide this. Yeah, bring your render mesh back. Select the LODs, click attach, and drag and drop it into your render mesh. So as you can see, everything attaches to the render mesh. Both the LODs attached to the render mesh, and all 4 physics proxies also attach to the render mesh. And the render mesh obviously attaches to the dummy, and you only export the dummy. So let's open up the utilities tab, and let's reset the Xform on our render mesh. You should do this at least once before you export your final export. This is very useful to avoid any scaling errors in game. So let's clear list, select our dummy, add selected, export the nodes. Again, make sure export file per node is active. This is very important when you're using this parenting technique. So back into the editor, let's delete our asset and press Ctrl Z. This way you will force the editor to refresh the collisions on that mesh. So P draw helpers 1, and here it is. Our collision is working just fine. We're using 2 objects and 2 meshes for the collisions. So to make sure everything is working correctly, let's just jump in game and shoot at the object. Make sure everything is working correctly. There you go. You see wood particles and wood decals when you fire at wood, and metal particles and metal decals when you fire at the metal pieces. This is the reason why you need 2 separate proxy sub materials. Otherwise, you will just get one sub material, one kind of decal. So back into Max. Say you want to make really quick changes to your asset, whatever it is. Create new geometry, UV changes. You can do this almost on the fly. Let's just create a new plank here, and let's just export this really quick, just to show you how quick it is to just make changes and visualize it in the engine again. So I just copied a new plank. Yes, I want to overwrite. Wait for the resource compiler to export, click close, and if you jump back into the editor, voila, here's how it changes. Very quick, very fast. It's very easy to just make quick changes into your object and see them on the fly. Let's bring the material editor. Click the eyedropper to get the material off the bench, and let's make sure both the material from the CryEngine and the material on Max are in sync. So if we bring up the material editor in Max and make sure your material is selected and is selected in the editor as well, and let's bring the CryEngine exporter and click in from editor to sync material. This will sync both materials. So now you can also see a texture on Max's viewport. So now let's just make sure our LODs are working correctly. And also make sure your LODs and obviously all your proxies are using the material they should use. Everything on your scene should use the same material. Let's just delete this useless blank. And one last export. So let's reset the Xform on our render mesh. Yes, I want to collapse all. Select the dummy, CryEngine 3 exporter, clear, add selected, and export nodes. Yes, I want to overwrite. So if we type 255 on the load ratio, our LODs will kick in much sooner. So if we zoom in and out, you can see the LODs kicking in. So yeah, everything is working correctly. Let's bring it to 100 again, and there you go. I hope you found this tutorial useful.